Welcome back. In this video, we will go over the anatomy of the vertebra. Then we will point out the differences between each type of vertebra. The vertebral column, it consists of 24 single vertebra. We have 7 cervical vertebra, 12 thoracic vertebra, and 5 lumbar vertebra. First, all vertebra, they have some features in common, whether it's the cervical, thoracic, or lumbar. First, they all have a body. This right here is the body of the cervical vertebra. This is for the thoracic vertebra, and this is the body for the lumbar vertebra. They all have a spinous process. This right here is the spinous process for the lumbar vertebra. This is for the thoracic vertebra, and this is for the cervical vertebra. They all have a transverse process. This right here is the transverse process. This is the transverse process for the thoracic vertebra, and this right here is the transverse process for the cervical vertebra. They all have a vertebral foramen where the spinal cord is. So the vertebral foramen, this opening, this right here is the vertebral foramen, and this is the vertebral foramen. The vertebral canal is formed by all the vertebral foramen from the 24 vertebra. Also, they have a lamina. The lamina is the part that connects the transverse process to the spinous process. So this right here is the lamina, as we can see. This is the lamina right here for the thoracic, and this is the lamina for the cervical. They also have a pedicle. A pedicle, it is the part between the transverse process and the body. So that is the pedicle right here on both sides. This right here is the pedicle on both sides, and that is the pedicle for the cervical vertebra. Also, all vertebra, they have superior and inferior articular process. The superior and inferior articular process allows the vertebra to articulate with one another. Also, all vertebra, they have the intervertebral foramina. Inter means between. Vertebral, vertebra, foramina. This opening right here, this is the intervertebral foramina, which allows the spinal nerves to exit the spinal cord. So the spinal cord, it runs in the vertebral foramen and the intervertebral foramina where the spinal nerves exit. On this model, we can see part of the vertebral column. These right here, the body of the vertebra. In between, we can see the intervertebral foramina where the spinal nerves exit. Posteriorly, we can see the spinous process of all the vertebra. On both sides, we can see the transverse process of each vertebra. In the vertebral foramen, we can see the spinal cord right here. Notice how the superior articular process of this vertebra right here, it articulates with the inferior articular process of the vertebra above it. Between the body of the vertebra, we have the intervertebral discs. Inter means between. Vertebral, the vertebral discs. These are fibrocartilage inconsistency. In this second part, we will go over the unique features of each type of vertebra. First, the cervical vertebra. The distinguishing features of the cervical vertebra are the transverse foramina. We can clearly see in the transverse process, we have these two openings right here. These are the transverse foramina, which allows blood vessels that supplies the head, the neck, and the face to run through it. The second unique feature is the bifid spinous process. The spinous process for all the cervical vertebra except C1 and C7 is bifid. You can see how it is bifurcated. Notice how the transverse foramen allows blood vessels in red to pass through it. This is C1, this is C2, C3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's go over the difference between C1 and C2. C1 is also called atlas. C2 is also called axis. Both are cervical vertebra. We can clearly see the transverse foramina that sets the cervical vertebra apart from all other types of vertebra. However, the atlas, it lacks a body and it has two large superior articular process to to articulate with the two occipital condyles of the skull. This right here can see the inferior aspect of the skull. This is the foramen magnum, that's the occipital bone. These are the occipital condyles, which articulate with the C1. Moving to the second vertebrae, C2, the axis. Notice how the superior portion of the body is modified into this process. This is the odontoid process, also called the dents. The odontoid process, it articulates with the atlas. The axis articulates with the atlas through the odontoid process and through the superior and inferior articular process. This is how the articulation between the C1 and the C2. Notice how the transverse foramen allows blood vessels in red to pass through it. This is C1, this is C2, C3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Moving to the thoracic vertebra, which are 12 in number. The primary unique feature of the thoracic vertebra is that they are the only vertebra among the three that articulates with the ribs. We have 12 pairs of ribs that articulate posteriorly with the 12 thoracic vertebra. And this, with the sternum, it forms the rib cage. Based on that, the unique feature in the thoracic vertebra are the costal demifacets. Demi means half, facet. Half a facet to receive the head of the rib. That's the costal. Costal related to the rib. So right here, you can see the costal demifacet on the body of the vertebra, which will receive this part. This is the head of the rib. The second unique feature of the thoracic vertebra are the articular facets. This is a demifacet, demi-half, whereas this is a full articular surface, which will articulate with the tubercle of the rib. So this right here is the tubercle of the rib. That's the head to articulate with the costal demifacets. The tubercle articulates with the facet on the transverse process. The third unique feature of the thoracic vertebra are their spinous process, which are angled sharply downwards, comparing to the cervical vertebra versus the lumbar vertebra. Moving to the lumbar vertebra, we have 5 lumbar vertebra. The unique features are they are the largest and heavier than the other vertebra. The spinous process is square and blunt. They lack the transverse foramina seen in the cervical vertebra, and they lack the costal demifacets seen in the thoracic vertebra. On these 3 models, we can see the 3 different types of vertebra. Right here, we have the thoracic vertebra with the long and angled spinous process. We also can see the costal demifacets on the body and the costal facets on the transverse process. This right here is the cervical vertebra. We can see the blood vessel running through the transverse foramina. Whereas right here we have the lumbar vertebra. Notice the square and blunt spinous process. The body are the largest among the 3 types. I hope you found the video helpful. If so, hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing content.